As promised, here's a comparison between Snowflake and Palantir. From Snow's website, here's a description of their beginnings. Snowflake's founders started from scratch and built a data platform that would harness the immense power of the cloud. But their vision did not stop there. They engineered Snowflake to power the data cloud, where thousands of organizations have seamless access to explore, share, and unlock the true value of their data. So, essentially, Snowflake and Palantir are making big data happen. What immediately sets them apart? Their perspective, valuations, and public recognitions. Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway led Snow to a smashing debut. After all, Buffett has been able to thrive in all sorts of market environments and economic conditions by adapting his investing strategy over time. In my eyes, Berkshire's interest in Snowflake is a validation of the company's product and potential. The fact that Buffett was willing to pay such a high multiple on this business indicates that Berkshire believes the company's performance will eventually justify the valuation. The IPO price was initially set for $75, upped to $120, and then opened at $245. One of the craziest IPOs I've ever seen, and I have to attribute that to Buffett's early stage involvement as an investing legend. Palantir, on the other hand, had no such IPO celebration, and there was a period of time when the stock fell below the offering price for a few weeks that you could find almost nothing positive about the company. Perhaps except for my overly optimistic videos saying that I was buying Palantir under $10 when we got confirmation of ARK Invest's involvement. It's been all uphill since then. Back to Snowflake. I'm going to play some clips from analysts and the CEO talking about the company. Listen to how they talk about growth, and try and think about what we've talked about with Palantir's perspective growth in that regard.
Snowflake went from being something that was incredibly exciting to being something that felt like a top for a lot of people. I can tell you, David, is that it's absurd versus its own group. Remember, Zoom is the fastest growing. Zoom also, they're about similar growth, but guess what? Zoom is incredibly profitable.
Right.
And Zoom's at 50 times. A lot of people felt that the underwriters did a bad pricing. They priced it at Zoom levels. Zoom's the most expensive company in the market until Snowflake. All I could say is that Snowflake is too difficult to understand for the people who bought the stock. And Frank Slootman is so great. Woo.
Biggest software IPO ever at 120 a share. Right now, we're at, what, 275-ish? You're the market cap, above the market cap of VMware, which started with virtualization and broadened out considerably. Is Snowflake's story going to be even broader than the one you told in the prospectus?
Well, you know, we stick to what we obviously what we said in the prospectus, but I think in the prospectus, you know, we laid out as best we could, you know, what we think is the full potential and scope of this opportunity. And, you know, we talked all week to investors about, you know, what the full ambition is of this company. And obviously, you know, people are excited about that. They want to be part of this journey, and sort of brings us to where we are today.
Tell me how you're measuring success over the near and even medium term. Is profitability even a thing that you should be talking about, that investors should be thinking about, or are you primarily focused on growth and on product?
Well, we are primarily focused on growth, but what we're not focused on is what people refer to as growth at all costs. And you can see in our numbers, you know, over the last year, certainly since Mike Scarpelli and I joined the company, that we have significantly bended the curve. We're driving up our unit economics, our gross margins, and our operating efficiency in every part of those expenditures is going up in leaps and bounds as well. And you can see in sales and marketing that as a percentage of the revenue, it's coming down very, very fast. And, you know, we're focused on that. But we think that a lot of leverage in the model will come from sales and marketing. That's just the type of business that this is. Yeah.
Are Amazon, Microsoft, and Google dangerous to you as they try to do some of the things that you do in their own clouds? What would you say to investors who are concerned about that and wonder about the true legs of this multi-cloud story?
Collectively, as an industry, you know, sometimes we partner, sometimes we compete. Competition is not bad. You know, it makes all of us better. The customer benefits. Can't sort of make too much of the fact that, you know, sometimes it gets pretty intense out there in the marketplace.
Doug, can you kind of start by telling people why Snowflake is such a valuable asset in general here?
I think over the last decade, we've heard so much about this trend toward big data. And the next evolution, in our opinion, of big data is really big data management, because the point of big data is to create intelligent software. It's to create incredible experiences for users. And it's really the precursor to AI. And what Snowflake does, I think why people are really excited about it thematically, is it is sort of that bridge, in our opinion, from big data to more intelligent software. They help companies essentially architect their data more intelligently in the cloud.
Who are the rivals in this space? How much of a lead does Snowflake have? How much of a moat does it have, to use the Berkshire language?
So I think really, when I think about their competition, some of their biggest competition are actually the companies they work with, the cloud providers themselves, AWS, Google, Microsoft with Azure. Those are the ones that I would be most focused on. Certainly there's other ones in the market like a Hadoop. There's other companies that are sort of, I'd say, in the same game, in the same league, companies like Databricks, which is a private company still. But I do think that if I were an investor in Snowflake, I would be focused more on those big cloud providers, trying to expand their capabilities and sort of shutting Snowflake out of the market.
As we know, Amazon loves to go down the balance sheet and turn every cost center into a new revenue item. So Snowflake would appear to be a candidate for that. What's its valuation right now, Doug? At about $245 this morning, right about its IPO price. What are we talking about in terms of the multiple on revenue, and does it generate earnings?
It doesn't generate earnings yet. I think in our rough estimate, it's somewhere around 70 times next year's revenue. So as Leslie said, that would make it, even at the time of the IPO, I think it was one of the most expensive software companies in the market. And now I think it is far and away one of the most expensive companies in the software market. We are cautious here. The valuation, I think, is rich. So over the next 6 to 12 months, I think we're going to see more volatility in the name. And I think long-term investors might get another chance at a more attractive valuation.
Okay, I find it interesting that they don't bring up Palantir at all during these discussions. Maybe these two companies aren't directly competing in the traditional sense, but there is definitely some overlap there. I'd like to get your thoughts on if they are competing for clients. Palantir's got the government and some more businesses as kind of a fallback for them. I would like to see them get a much more commercial side to their core business, whereas I think Snowflake at this point has a much more commercial side to them. I believe the investing community has yet to realize Palantir on a large enough scale yet, but I do believe PLTR will be in the same conversation as Snowflake a year from now. Now on to the charts. Snowflake has yet to report its Q3 results, so that won't show up here, but we do have PLTR's fiscal third quarter numbers to show. Alright, here's the comparison for revenue. We have Palantir and then Snowflake. This is the revenue segment just to start off. Palantir is much higher in terms of their revenue that they are generating each quarter. We'll have to see what Snowflake is able to put out for the third quarter of 2020 since they have not reported yet. And it looks like Snowflake may be growing at a higher rate than Palantir, but I just see Palantir with these big government contracts that kind of makes them a more valuable company in my eyes at this point. Look, they've got the growth. It's still there. Maybe Snowflake has higher growth. I haven't looked at the percentages, but Palantir actually has higher numbers at this point. Let's move on to gross profit. Again, Palantir bringing in much more gross profit, and Palantir, you see them dropping below. That's because of all their fees associated with the listing, because they did a direct listing. Some pretty impressive growth from Snowflake, but again, Palantir is just significantly higher already. All right, moving on to operating expenses. Yeah, this is going to be the outlier from Palantir here because of their listing. They used a lot of stock-based compensation. It looks like Snowflake is almost spending half as much in terms of operating expenses historically. I guess there's not too much to worry about here, so it'll be interesting to see how both of these companies treat the operating expenses going forward. I would like to see Snowflake for Q3 and then maybe how Palantir does in Q4, see if they're able to work it down even more. I would hope Palantir would be able to return to the $300 million range instead of the almost $1 billion that they were going through in Q3 because of the listing. And in terms of Snowflake, I think they should be able to drop it maybe closer to $100 million. That is, if they're not spending heavily on R&D and if their core business just really pumps out a lot of cash. All right, moving on to the operating income. Again, Q3, an absolute outlier for Palantir. And you'll see, again, they're pretty neck and neck here. It is a pretty fair comparison, but Palantir is the one generating more revenue. They've got the bigger contracts. Snowflake is just not as competitive in that regard. Their operating incomes are pretty much even. Yes, Palantir is actually a little more negative. If we go back to how much revenue they're actually pulling in comparatively, that's a little disappointing in regards to Snowflake. All right, moving on to gross margin. Palantir does have a much higher margin. You'll see they are pretty close, and then Palantir really dips down. Palantir does seem to have a stronger margin, at least right now, but Snowflake seems to be accelerating gradually. You'll see from there to there to there, increasing just slightly, and maybe they're getting started for a massive run. I would hope that Palantir would be able to bounce back from this huge dip in Q4. Again, we will see that shortly. And then operating margin, both looking very strong, and Palantir turning to a negative operating margin in Q3, which is really something I did not want to see for them. But you'll see Snowflake starting really low and working its way up. That's a good trend for the company. Palantir also working its way up, dipping down in Q2 and then taking a huge hit in Q3. So I'd like to see both companies. We'll probably see a huge snapback from Palantir in the fourth quarter. Both companies using their software as a service are really going to be headed in the right direction. And then moving on to profit margin, same kind of trend here, pretty much the same exact trend. I think both of these companies are really going to take software in its best sense and really make it a value to the investors. And I think that's what investors of both of these companies are excited about, and that would be these companies becoming very profitable in the future. So how do you feel about Snowflake when comparing them to Palantir? Personally, I like Palantir more as a strong growth play at this point. Snowflake seems just a little too richly valued, but that's not always a bad thing. What do you think? If you had to, what stock would you bet on? I think both are headed up, and we'll get a good sense of the trajectory of both stocks over the next year. Are you invested in PLTR? In Snow? Leave a comment. Like if you do, subscribe if you're new. An avalanche of content is on the way. Until next time.